I was sitting out the front just a couple of minutes ago, just before church, and Edmund was queuing for a coffee. Where are you, Edmund? There you are. And he came up to me and said, this is my first Easter as a Christian. And he told me the story of walking into this building Good Friday morning a year ago and coming in a little nervously, eventually deciding to do the Introducing God course that we were running. And there is a man who has met Jesus. Now, we started our advertising campaign for Easter under this banner, and we'll put it up on the screen here, of Meet Jesus. And the idea is that this Easter weekend is a weekend to get to know Jesus better, to personally grow in your relationship with Jesus. And I'm working on the assumption for these couple of minutes that we've got together that there are some here who know a fair bit about Jesus, and there are some like Edmund a year ago who know next to nothing. And I just want to say, wherever you are on that spectrum, you are so welcome. I want to suggest, though, Jesus is someone it is important to meet, to know. I like getting to know people. I actually, one of the ways I like getting to know people is by reading their biographies. And if you come to my study at home, I have a bookshelf full of biographies. And I'm interested in all sorts of different biographies, different historical figures, different people from contemporary life. But also I'm interested in political biographies. The political biography I'm reading at the moment, I picked up from Glee Books a couple of weeks ago, this one on Bob Hawke. And what do you make of Hawke? Well, Prime Minister of Australia, 1983, 1991, political leader. I think probably, as a political leader, he was probably Australia's greatest Labor Prime Minister. He did some significant things that have had lasting impact. He floated the dollar. He was the father of Medicare. He remade the Australian-US alliance. Significant environmental decisions, changed our national anthem from God Save the Queen to Advance Australia Fair. And yet, this book, Demons and Destiny, the thesis of the book is, well, there's destiny and demons. Personally, I have a mixed impression. I met him once as a junior journalist when he was Prime Minister. I was a junior journalist, and my personal interaction was positive, but one of my co-workers, also a junior journalist, had a much more negative interaction. She felt uncomfortably sexually pursued by him. There was an enormous power imbalance. He was Prime Minister, she was junior journalist, and it was awful. What do you make of Jesus? I mean, and I want to say, what you make of Jesus actually matters in a way that it doesn't matter what you think of Bob Hawke. What I'm going to do is tackle this getting to know Jesus by looking at this half chapter from Jesus' biography. So if you just open up that sheet and look at it with me, it's a page from the Bible. It's a page from the Bible written by this follower of Jesus, John, and it's a page from the Bible on a super significant day. And I'm going to tackle it under two headings, and you see them there under point 2 and 3, the heading who and the heading what. The first thing that you can say about Jesus is that when he died as King of the Jews. And there's massive implications from that. Hold that thought. Just follow with me from verse 16, inside page of the handout here. He handed him over to be crucified. They took Jesus away, verse 17, carrying the cross by himself. He went out to the cross that he carried. In popular culture, the cross that he carried is a thing like that, but actually the big post was stuck in the ground beforehand. What he carried was one long, heavy plank. He went out to this place of the skull. I was doing my preparation. Some of you guys are medical people. I was doing my preparation on this. I was translating it from the New Testament. These are my translation notes, translating it from New Testament Greek. Actually, I got up to this word skull. I highlighted it here. And I was there translating, and it's craniu. And I thought, cranium. Oh. Anyway, as a little nerdy type person, I thought that was exciting. Do you know that skull in ancient Greek? So I had that little nerd moment, so I share it with you today. The place of the skull, no one knows. I mean, it's somewhere in the Jerusalem environment. I went there 2018, and the suggestion of our tour guides and the historical reading I've done on this, the historians cautiously agree with the tour guides that the most likely place for this site is where this church is built, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. That photo I took, this one somebody did with a drone shot. But most likely, this is the place where this moment happened. Verse 18, there they crucified him, and 2 others with him, one on either side, Jesus in the middle. Pilate, the Roman governor in charge of Judea at the time, verse 19, Pilate also had a sign made and put on the cross. It was fairly standard for a charge sheet to be written up for someone who was being crucified. And as they walked that walk, the courthouse in Jerusalem to the place of the skull where the executions happened, someone would walk out. The person would be there carrying that crossbar, and somebody would be walking ahead with the charge sheet, whatever the crime was. It could be the charge of murder, it could be the charge of tax evasion, it could be, pedophilia, whatever the charge was. And there would be a sign. And similarly, there would have been a sign here. The sign, and it was eventually put on the cross above Jesus' head. And the sign was, I'm looking at verse 19, it said, Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. Many of the Jews read this sign because the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and it was written in Aramaic, Latin, and Greek. And by putting it in 3 languages, it's the 3 languages most used in that area. This is a wide public declaration. Now, you could say this was a moment where the Roman governor Pilate was given a special spiritual insight, where he saw things clearly. You might like to say that this was a moment where Pilate, who had weakly craved into the pressure tactics of the Jewish high priests earlier, now displays real strength of character and declares in Aramaic, Latin and Greek what he knew to be true, that Jesus was the King of the Jews. But to run that interpretation, I think, would be to be overly generous to Pilate. What had happened was the Jewish leaders had manipulated Pilate, they had pressured him, they had intimidated him to secure Jesus' execution. And I think Pilate is determined to humiliate those who humiliated him in return. And so I think Pilate's motive when he writes this sign, the King of the Jews, his agenda as the Roman governor is to stick it to the Jewish leaders, saying, you guys are powerless. Especially you Jews, you're powerless, you're impotent, especially when compared to the almighty Roman Empire, the all-conquering Roman Empire. For look what happens to your king. He is rendered feeble and weak and vulnerable and powerless and dead before the might of Rome. Now, backstory. When he writes the King of the Jews, for 1,000 years or more, the Jewish people had been longing for a king. When you read through the Old Testament part of the Bible, there is prophecy and longing, and we're looking forward to the coming of the Messiah, and the Messiah will put things right, and the Messiah will rule the world on behalf of God. There is a promised Messiah king figure, and the Jews are looking forward to this figure. He'd be a descendant of David, and he will not just rule Jerusalem, but rule the universe. That's the Old Testament promise. For eternity, there'll be a king on David's throne forever. Now here's a language lesson. The word king in English is the word Messiah in Hebrew, which is the word Christ in Greek. So when you hear the word Christ, think king, ruler. When you hear the word Messiah, think Christ, which equals king, ruler. Now, and when you hear the word king, ruler, don't think someone like the English king who's a symbolic king. Think a real king with real power and real authority. And so whereas Pilate has this petty personal agenda of mocking the Jewish leaders, mocking the Jewish high priests who had previously vigorously pushed for the execution of Jesus, Pilate, when he writes the King of the Jews, is actually speaking much truer than he knows. This man Jesus being executed right now is your Christ, your King. The Jewish leaders, they don't like that statement, they don't like that assertion. They try to put pressure on Pilate to change the statement. Sentence 21. So the chief priests of the Jews said to Pilate, "Don't write the King of the Jews, but write he claimed, he said he was King of the Jews." Pilate comes back to them and says, "What I've written, I've written. What I've written stands written, and I'm leaving it on the public record in 3 languages for all the world to know. This man being killed is the Jews' king, the ruler of the people of God." Now, at this point, virtually no one was recognising that. Today, it's more muddled. One of my friends, we were talking together, and he agreed to read. We were talking about the things of God, spiritual things. He wasn't a Christian. And anyway, he agreed to read the whole biography of Jesus, just like I've been reading Hawke's biography. He said, I'll read it and form my opinion of Jesus. And look, I just want to say, if you haven't done that, you should. Part of being an educated person in Western society is to know this Christ. And you read this book. I'll just give you this. This is Hawke. I'll put the quote up on the screen. Troy Branston writes on him. Hawke turned a blind eye to his own personal indiscretions, which risked the moral integrity of his government. Anything that had a whiff of overt lack of integrity, well, mates were disposable, he'd sack them. Evans said, but getting drunk and gambling and other women was not something that troubled him. It is a damning judgment. This is Bramston on Hawke. Hawke was a sleaze. But what you think of him is irrelevant to how you function today. But what you make of Jesus actually changes everything for how you function today. And my suggestion is that when you read the gospel narrative, the biography of Jesus, you will see what I've come to see, that Jesus is the King, the real King, the ruler of all. My friend, I said to him, why don't you read John's account of Jesus' life, the biography of Jesus? He was chief economic correspondent for ABC Radio. And he said, after he'd read it, the first thing he said was, I'm so surprised at how little snippets of Jesus' life, how many little snippets of Jesus' life I already knew or half knew from popular culture. But then he said, the thing that's really shaken me is his authority, his wisdom, and he's made me see that I'm not very good at ruling my life, and it would be better if I gave governance of my life over to this real authority, this real King. If you like, took my hands off the steering wheel of my life and asked him to drive my life. Now, In our society, some do and some don't recognise Jesus as King. But if I could just step inside your comfort zone for a minute, just ask yourself, where are you on the kingship of Jesus? And the kingship of Jesus, not just as an abstract, but in your life. Is he really your Lord, your King? Who is Jesus for you? Now, my point 3 on the handout, what was Jesus' mission? What did he come to do? Well, what did Jesus do? First thing, what Jesus did, came to do, what he did, it's finished. You just see that. I'm just going to go to the last sentence of our reading. When Jesus had received the sour wine, I was thinking, you did that little drama with the kids, Alan and Tiffany. It would have kind of been better to, rather than do Brussels sprouts, to have sour wine. But anyway, when Jesus had received the sour wine, he said, "It is finished." This is a really important point. Jesus came to die, came to be crucified. He was born to die. That was his central aim. And when he died, he'd finished the task. And you see the next line, bowing his head, he gave up his spirit. It is a very shallow reading of John's Gospel to think in these events that Jesus was not in control. Jesus came on a mission to die. Jesus gave up his spirit. He looks like the vulnerable, beaten one, but he is actually the totally in control one. More on that in a moment. Point B, what can we say about this mission of Jesus that he was so intentional about? Well, if it was his mission to die, he died for a purpose. He laid down his life for his sheep. Let me show you this. If you flick back a couple of pages in John's Gospel, and we'll put the verse up on the screen, to John chapter 10, sentence 11. Jesus is teaching some people, and he says in John chapter 10, verse 11, "I am the good shepherd." The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. He's running with a metaphor. Jesus is the shepherd. There are sheep that he cares for. The fox comes to hunt the sheep, to attack the sheep. The good shepherd puts the interests of the sheep ahead of his own interests, and he lays down his life. He dies in place of the sheep. Or you come a few sentences further. In the same passage, John chapter 10, verse 18, Jesus speaking of laying down his life, he says, "No one takes it from me. I lay it down on my own." I'm in control. I have the right to lay it down, and I have the right to take it up again. Jesus is saying my mission is to lay down my life. There are deaths that are purposeless deaths, and there are deaths that are purposeful deaths. My dad's 85. This last week, he and I have made a decision to go to the UK together in June. My dad's older brother, 87, is not well with cancer, and really it's a last chance for Dad to see his older brother. And I'm going to go and accompany him on the trip. And Dad and I were talking and planning about our trip together, and he said, "While we're there, I'd like to visit your cousin's grave." And my cousin Nicholas was killed in a motorbike accident when he was 19. He was born before me. I don't remember him actually, but his death was pointless. His death was just a tragic, awful car accident. There was no rhyme or reason to it. But 23-year-old Oscar White, after church, that's the photo, or not photo, that's the stained glass window remembering 23-year-old Oscar White. His death was for a purpose. Lieutenant, 2nd Battalion, Australian Infantry Force, 4th of October 1917. He went on a mission and died for a reason. Jesus was on a mission, lay down my life for the sheep, for a reason. Let's unpack that. How did it work, laying down life for the sheep? I gave you that from John 10. You keep reading John's Gospel, the biography, you get to John 13. And this is the line, John 13, verse 4. Jesus got up from supper, laid aside his outer clothing, took a towel, tied it on himself. Next he poured water into a basin, began to wash the disciples' feet, to dry them with a towel around him. He came to Simon Peter, who asked him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus answered him, "What I'm doing you don't realise now, but afterwards you'll understand." "You'll never wash my feet," Peter said. "If I don't wash you, you'll have no part with me." Then Simon Peter said, "Lord, not only my feet, but also wash me all over." Now, John 13, it's a metaphor. Jesus, when he washes the disciples' feet, he's giving us, I'm washing you, I'm making you clean. And the inference is, Jesus' mission is to make us clean, you and me. Again, let me digress, stop imparting information, speak to each of us personally. We need washing by Jesus. Why? And I'm not just talking about external dirt, I'm talking about our inner lives. Why do our inner lives need washing? Because before God, we are unacceptable. We know that's true, actually. You know it's true. I mean, I'm reading the Hawke book, Demons and Destiny. He was a brilliant man, an extraordinary politician, approval ratings as a politician phenomenal. And yet, as an individual, as a husband, as a father, he was appalling. You say, okay, well, that's pointing out there, Dominic, at that guy out there. But this week in the paper, there's news story after news story of people rising to great heights, and then we discover their inner flaws. The press secretary for the police commissioner, great heights, now sacked, inner flaws yesterday. The principal of Cranbrook School, great heights, sacked, inner flaws. Or it's come to light this week about 2 senior specialist doctors acting in disappointing ways sexually with junior colleagues. Great heights, inner flaws. But it's not just them out there. All of us are mixtures of demons and destiny. All of us are mixtures of diamonds and dung. There are points for all of us where we're brilliant. And there are points for all of us where we're appalling. Premier Dominic Perrottet, I've been going on about the Labor Prime Minister, now the Liberal Premier. A Nazi uniform he wore to his 21st birthday party. What an idiot. But we're all idiots. There are moments in my life that I think about and I think, how did I do that? What was I thinking? Where was my self-control? What was my left brain doing? Where is the methodical me? What was I? That was awful, Dominic. My good bits are different to Bob Hawke's good bits, and my terrible bits are different to Bob Hawke's terrible bits, but I'm not better. And you're not better. Before God, we need washing. Before God, we're unacceptable. It's not just Hawke or the principal of Cranbrook or the police commissioner's media officer. It's you and it's me. I've done things and you've done things and I've planned things and thought things and said things. I'm unacceptable for heaven before the Almighty. I need to be washed by Jesus. I need Good Friday. And if this idea back in John 13 of Jesus washing us is the setup, then it's all over John 19. Let's come to point D. Jesus humbly washes his disciples' feet, John 13. Now in the crucifixion narrative, 1923, when the soldiers crucified Jesus, they took his clothes, divided them into 4 parts, a part for each soldier. They took the tunic, which was seamless, woven in one piece from the top. They said to one another, "Let's not tear it, but cast lots for it to see who gets it." This happened that the scripture might be fulfilled that said that they divided my clothes among themselves and cast lots for my clothing. This is what the soldiers did. I met Jesus properly in 1986. I think I became a Christian that year. I think I gave my first Christian talk on the crucifixion. The first time I taught on it was probably 1990 to a kids' church class. And I think this is my 21st Good Friday talk. I thought I knew most of everything about the crucifixion, yet here's the new thought I've had in preparation for today that I don't think I've had before. Maybe I have, but I don't think so. When Jesus in chapter 13 washed the disciples' feet, and that action anticipated Jesus' death, and it was extraordinary humility by him, so humble that Peter felt uncomfortable. In the washing of his feet, or the washing of their feet, of the disciples, to cleanse his disciples, Jesus laid aside his outer garment. And here's the new thought for me. When Jesus humbly lays down his life to make us clean, he loses his clothes, all his clothes. It's the same humbling that we saw in play in John 13. But here, it's not just laying aside the outer garment, it's everything as they cast lots and then they divide them. What you have on the cross is Jesus, God's King, God's ruler, hanging, vulnerable, naked, exposed, with nothing. The artworks that people have done down through the centuries, they picture Jesus wearing shorts. But that's not accurate. He had nothing. He died for us totally vulnerable, totally exposed. And he did it so that God might declare us acceptable. We were unacceptable to the Almighty. Jesus died in our place. We are now forgiven, accepted, welcomed. That's Good Friday. It's ironic. The soldiers are there carrying out their barbaric task, in the process picking out a new wardrobe. And in contrast to these thugs, the women come in faithful devotion to Jesus. Right model response, standing by, this is verse 25, the cross of Jesus, where his mother's sister Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When everyone else is running away, these 3 women come to Jesus to honour him, to express devotion as disciples. And Jesus provides, cares, loves, blesses his mother, gives provision for her. When Jesus saw his mother, 26, the disciple he loved standing there, he said to his mother, "Woman, here's your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Here is your mother." And from that hour, the disciple took her into his home. I think there's a hint for us there. It's just a hint, but if you trust Jesus, if you come to him in devotion, if you come to him in humility, you can anticipate that he'll look after you. Now, we're going to take questions and comments in a moment. And on the web page that should still be open on the browser on your phone from when you checked in on your arrival today, there's a place you could write a question and comment. But just in conclusion, we've seen Jesus this morning. We've seen who he is, King Ruler, and we've seen what he did. He died for us. Totally in control, the King, on a mission to lay down his life to wash us clean. Now, that's only part one of the story. Part two is Easter Sunday. Easter Sunday morning, Easter Sunday evening. Easter Sunday evening, we're actually baptising 4 of our members. But what might at this stage our response be to this offer, this invitation to meet Jesus? Well, there's some here, and I said at the beginning, there'll be some here who know lots and some here who are pretty much new to knowing Jesus. I want to say that investigating Jesus 3 weeks, or when we start it, as the new school term starts, the Introducing God course. How do you say you want to go? Well, I thought I brought this up. There's an orange card. I did. Yeah, orange card on your seat. If you want to just could everybody grab this orange card then, just so that nobody feels uncomfortable at any point? And I think there are pens on the seats, and if I could get the usher people to pass out any extra orange cards that are needed for anybody sitting over there in business class on the orange leather couches. We're all feeling a bit jealous of you guys, sorry, that's just a joke. It's not really business class. That's not the way it works in church. If you just fill that in, write a thought, a comment on the right-hand side. But just down the bottom left, it says, I'd like to find out more about Jesus. And if you tick the find out more about Jesus box, then Alex and the crew that are organising this Investigating Jesus or the Introducing God, they'll make contact with you and invite you along to that. Now, while you're filling that in, let me just say, what I've found is that sometimes someone says, Dominic, I want to do that course. Or it might even be you've done one of our courses in the past. You say, but can I fix this today? Because really, the issues have come together with a clarity this morning that perhaps I haven't seen before. And if that's you and you're in that position where you want to fix things with Jesus today, I'll tell you what you need to say to Jesus, to God. First thing, sorry that I've not lived in a way that pleases you. Just fess up. Second thing, thank you that Jesus died to wash me clean. And thirdly, please help me to live with Jesus as my ruler. So it's a prayer of sorry, thank you, please. Now, I've printed it there on the bottom right of the handout sheet. I'm going to pray that prayer. And if this is you, and you know you want to make that step of sorry, I'm going to fess up to God. He knows already, but tell him what you've done wrong. Thank you that Jesus died for me. And please help me to live with Jesus, not as the symbolic ruler of my life, but to take my hands off the steering wheel and let him drive my life. Would you join me in speaking to God in prayer? Heavenly Father, I am sorry that I have not lived in a way that pleases you. Thank you that Jesus died to wash me clean. Please help me to live with Jesus as my ruler. Amen.